Hello there, this is Senris. In this video, we will be ranking all the starter Pokemon in a tier list, including the recently announced starters from the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet games. For those who don't know, I'm a big fan of Pokemon and tier list style videos, and so this will probably be the start of a series on those. Let me know in the comments if you enjoy this type of video and also other things that deserve a tier list. I'll also mention that this tier list is just based on looks and design of the starter Pokemon, as opposed to combat ability, because starters aren't relevant in actual battles, where you would bring their evolved forms instead. So let's begin with Bulbasaur, the first Pokemon in the Pokedex. I like Bulbasaur's design. It has friendly, striking eyes, and I like how it doesn't look very much like a real animal. The bulb on its back is more interesting than a lot of grass Pokemon designs where they just have random leaves growing out of them that don't really serve a purpose, as opposed to Bulbasaur's bulb, which helps give it nourishment from photosynthesis. It's also cool that the grass type moves it uses integrate the bulb, as Vine Whips, Razor Leafs, and Leech Seeds all shoot out from the bulb itself. Overall, I'd say Bulbasaur is a better than average starter Pokemon, and I'd place it in the B tier. Next is Squirtle, which is the first Pokemon I ever picked as a kid when Red and Blue first came out. Me and my little brothers saved up our allowance money all summer so that we could buy a Game Boy Color and Pokemon Red version. That first playthrough with my Squirtle was one of the best times I've had with any video game, until one of my brothers erased the game because he caught a Nidoran and thought that was some super rare Pokemon worth erasing my Blastoise and Zapdos over. The idea that Pokemon games still don't allow multiple save files on the same console or account has angered me from then until now. In any case, Squirtle is one of my favorite starters. Its design is simple, but I like the color palette, its cheery face, and weird tail. It also looks especially badass with sunglasses. I think Squirtle is a better than average design, but due to my personal attachment to it and nostalgia, I'm going to place it in A tier. Now for Charmander, and probably one of my more controversial takes in this video, but I think Charmander is overrated and not that interesting. It suffers from a phenomena that lots of other fire Pokemon have as well, where they only look cool because fire is a part of their design. If Charmander didn't have its flame tail, it would just look like a cartoon lizard. Its color palette is also limited, but not necessarily in a bad way, and it just doesn't have many defining features. I will admit that fire is one of my least favorite types and water is one of my favorites, so that will shade my opinion on these types of Pokemon, but I honestly don't think Charmander deserves the popularity. I think it deserves a stealth rock to the face. I don't hate the design, I just think it's very average and overhyped, and so I'm putting it in C tier. Next we have the second gen Pokemon, all of which I think are downgrades compared to their Gen 1 companions. Now I'm not a Gen 1er or anything like that. Gen 2 is actually my favorite generation and Gen 1 is one of my least favorites. I just think that Gen 2 starters are sort of generic and simple looking. Chickarita is one of the worst looking grass types. It has that random leaves coming out of it quality I mentioned earlier that I don't like, as well as random orbs growing out of its neck for good measure. I don't know if those are supposed to be seeds or what, but they look like they were added just because Chickarita doesn't really have any features other than its leaf. It's just a generic mammal design spray painted green with a leaf on its head. I really fucking hate how it looks, to be honest. It reminds me of that weird gif that was the funniest thing ever to post on your friend's MySpace in 2004. Chickarita definitely belongs in the F tier. Totodile, on the other hand, is the best designed Gen 2 Pokemon. I like the color palette and crocodiles are very cool. It looks more ferocious than any of the other starters with its big open mouth and bared teeth. Most starters look like their bite couldn't even draw blood from an adult human, but Totodile looks like it could bite your leg off, or at least one of your toes. While its design still feels kind of average looking to me, I like it more than Charmander and the other C tier Pokemon coming up, so I'll place it at the top of C tier. Cyndaquil suffers from the same overly simple issue as the other Gen 2 starters. It also suffers from the same issue as Charmander, where the flame is the only thing holding it up, and it would look even more stupid than Charmander without it. But unlike Charmander, it makes some sort of sense, as Cyndaquil is supposed to be a hedgehog but with fire coming out of its back instead of quills. I think that offsets that a bit, but it's still one of the most boring looking starter designs. It also looks like it's supposed to evolve into Heatmor instead of Typhlosion, like it isn't sure if it wants to be an anteater or a rodent. Due to its underwhelming design, Cyndaquil goes in the D tier. Now for Generation 3, which is one of my least favorite generations, but has one of my favorite starters. First off, Treecko. I fucking hate Treecko. It's the lowest effort starter Pokemon of all, and it really just looks like a cartoon lizard with no originality. F tier. Mudkip, on the other hand, is one of the best looking starter Pokemon. While most starter Pokemon designs are pretty conservative in their design, like being a generic lizard or owl, Mudkip is an axolotl, which is cool in and of itself. It has a great color palette and interesting features like the big fin on its head and tail. I like how derpy its eyes look. It also has meme lord status that no other starter Pokemon has. Posting, "So I heard you like Mudkips" on your friend's MySpace in 2004 was the other funniest thing you could possibly do on the internet at the time. Mudkip isn't just one of my favorite starter Pokemon, but one of my favorite Pokemon designs of all, and so it is placed solidly in S tier. Torchic has the same sort of generic animal design as Trico, but it just sort of works somehow. The little details like its feather hairdo, its shoulder pad tufts, and the beady eyes just sort of make it a charming and cute little bird. I think its evolutionary forms look like total shit, but Torchic has a weird charm to it that I like. I'd say it's pretty average, better than Charmander, but not as good as Totodile, so it goes to high C tier. On to the 4th generation starters. 4th gen is kind of in a weird place for me right now, as I used to have nostalgic feelings for it, being the first 3D Pokemon game and the first one on the DS. I remember liking it when it came out and thinking it was the best Pokemon yet, but then I played the remake Shining Pearl and it has me wondering which of my other memories have been altered over the last 15 years. I now think Gen 4 is among the worst generations of Pokemon, especially compared to the expansive worlds of Gen 2 and 3 and the awesome story and battle sprites of Gen 5. So how do the starters compare? I'd say they're an improvement over the previous 2 generations overall. Turtwig is a solid design with a good color palette and a sort of tastefully conservative design. It's kinda just a generic turtle, but similar to Torchic, it just works somehow. I think the leaves on its head are closer to Bulbasaur's than Chickaritas in that it actually makes sense and is actually integrated into its evolutionary forms, as that sapling eventually becomes a tree growing on Torterra's back, similar to how Bulbasaur's bulb becomes a huge flower. Compare that to how Chikarita's leaf just becomes a slightly bigger leaf, and it just seems like it's an arbitrary decoration compared to many grass-type Pokemon whose roughage makes sense. Overall, I like Turtwig about as much as Bulbasaur, but he has kind of a derpy face, so I'll place him at B tier behind Bulbasaur. Piplup is a perfectly average looking starter Pokemon. I don't love it or hate it, it's kind of the same as Torchic, where it's just a generic cartoon bird, but it kinda works. I don't have much else to say, it's like a slightly worse Torchic, C tier. Chimchar is another pretty well-designed Pokemon. It's slightly more complex than some of the earlier starters and one of the more endearing anthropomorphic designs. One thing it suffers from is its color palette feels like it's missing at least one other color. Compare it to Grookey, who is similar but has more colors and complexity, and you can see what I mean. Its evolutionary form, Monferno, also looks a lot better, as the blue around its eyes pops a lot more than the red around Chimchar's eyes, which is a bit too similar to the burnt orange color of its body. I'd say I like Chimchar about as much as I like Charmander. It's flawed but still a decent design, so he'll go in the low end of C tier. Now for the 5th generation, which I feel has gone in the opposite direction of the 4th with regards to how its reputation has changed over time. At the time, people felt like it was solid but not amazing, but has grown to become one of the most well-respected and nostalgic games for people today, especially with regard to its awesome soundtrack and battle sprites. When they do 5th gen remakes, I really hope they stick with the sprites and just update them instead of using the same 3D models they've been using since the 3DS era. Unlike the games as a whole, which have held up well to the test of time, I think the 5th gen starters are another particularly weak bunch similar to 2nd gen. Snivy looks like a fanfiction Pokemon. It's like a snake with arms and legs and the head of a lizard. It's sort of unsettling in a way. I like the idea of a snake Pokemon, but this just ain't it. I think it's a pretty bad design, but not as bad as Chickarita or Trico, so I'd put it in D tier. Oshawott sucks even worse than Snivy. It really doesn't look like an otter at all, its face is featureless besides its weird frown and freckles, and its shoulder pad tufts don't make sense. Probably the worst starter besides Trico. T-Pig is okay, I like that it looks excited and ready for action, and its ears and snout are cute. It kind of looks like it's wearing a diaper. I have a soft spot for pigs, so that adds to its design for me, but overall I'd say it's a pretty average starter, nothing to write home about. I'd say T-Pig is in the middle of C tier. Generation 6 is a unique one. These days it's regarded as one of the worst generations, but it did introduce a lot of interesting mechanics. It was the first game to have multiple rivals and friends for the protagonist, as opposed to most games where you have one friend and one rival. It added Mega Evolution, which is probably the most well-liked gimmick mechanic that the fanbase wishes stuck around, as opposed to Z moves and Dynamaxing. Perhaps most importantly, it added the Fairy type, which finally brought balance to the Force, nerfing the overpowered Dragon type and buffing Poison and Fire type types offensively, which was desperately needed. It also buffed steel types both offensively and defensively, which no one asked for, but as someone whose favorite type is steel, I'm not complaining. The starters were also a big upgrade over the last couple generations. Chespin is a pretty average starter. I like its hat, it kind of looks like a beanie made out of grass. I don't like the trend of the few middle generations where they gave a lot of starters these undeveloped fingerless arms, and I think Chespin is probably the worst offender along with Oshawott. It makes sense for Piplup because his arms are useless wings, and Cyndaquil because he probably uses his front legs for running, not manipulating things. But Chespin is a squirrel, and squirrels have particularly dexterous and strong hands for climbing, digging, and moving nuts around to various places, and so I think he should at least have some little Charmander or Totodile fingers. I don't hate Chespin, but I think he's worse than average, so I'll put him at the top of D tier. Fennekin, on the other hand, is one of the best fire-type starter Pokemon. Fennec foxes look like real-life Pokemon, and I like that they made it a fire type instead of some of the more obvious picks like making it ice or just normal type. I like its big floofy ears and tail. One of the only criticisms I have of Fennekin's design is that it looks kind of like furry fanfiction, and its evolution Brazen is the most obvious furry bait Pokemon out of the whole 900 of the fuckers. Besides that obnoxious pandering, it's a good Pokemon design, and I'm going to place it at the top of B tier. Froakie is another great Pokemon design and one of my favorite starters. I love the big frog eyes, and even though his design is kind of busy for a water Pokemon, I think it works for him. The cloud cape thing reminds me of the frogs in Wind Waker. I like the white gloves too, they remind me of real life poisonous frogs. Froakie belongs at the top of B tier behind Fennekin and Bulbasaur. Generation 7 is the most unique generation in a lot of ways. They leaned harder into the place the region is based off, Hawaii, than any of the other games, although Generation 8 gives it a run for its money, innit? The battle UI and battle locations look especially tropical. Even if you didn't know it's supposed to be inspired by Hawaii specifically, you would still pick up that this is all based on tropical islands, as opposed to Gen 5, which is supposed to be New York City, or Gen 6, which is supposed to be France. Gen 7 also introduced riding Pokemon as a replacement for HMs, which was a cool feature, and a lot of the new Pokemon, including the starters, have really cool designs. Rowlet is definitely a better than average design. I really like owls, and I like his cute leaf bow tie and how round he is. His beady eyes have a very head-empty look to them. A notable thing about Rowlet is that he is the only starter Pokemon besides Bulbasaur that gets a second typing. Bulbasaur is Grass Poison, which I feel is somewhat of a liability as opposed to Grass, but Grass Flying is a pretty strong combo for a starter, especially when it starts hitting with Stabbed, Peck, and Pluck. The 4x Ice weakness sucks, but how often are you going to run into ice attacks before it evolves into Decidueye? My only slight critique of his design is it's kinda simple, like maybe it could use another small detail or something. I'd put Rowlet in low B tier behind Turtwig. Litten is one of the best starters for sure. It's adorable, I loved its striped socks and red whiskers, and they nail the cat-like expression in the eyes. I love cats, so there is some strong bias on this one, but it is just such a great design that it deserves one of the top slots. I don't have any complaints about Litten, and so it goes straight to the top of A tier, and is borderline S tier, but I want to reserve that only for my very favorite Pokemon. Now with Poplio, I don't know what they were thinking, to be honest. It's supposed to be a clown mixed with a seal, but it just comes off as looking kinda pathetic. Starter Pokemon aren't supposed to look particularly threatening, but this thing looks like it would lose in a fight to a Weedle. I hate its derpy face, its stupid nose, and the weird clown collar neck thing. This thing sucks almost as bad as Oshawott. It goes to the bottom of D tier. Generation 8 is one of the most disliked generations among the fanbase. People hate the GameCube-looking graphics, the pruning of the Pokedex, the missing GTS, and the complete lack of difficulty. I get where people are coming from, but I can't help but love it for being the first real console Pokemon game, something I've wanted since playing Pokemon Stadium. I love how British everything is. Gloria is probably my favorite protagonist design, and the wild area is one of the best ideas added to the series since the physical special split. Plus, the gym leader theme slaps, and it's my favorite song in all the Pokemon games, no contest. Like Gen 7, the new Pokemon introduced are some of the best newcomers in a long time, especially the starters, which are probably the best ones so far. Grookey is one of my favorite starters and probably the best monkey Pokemon of all. His little drumsticks add a lot of character, and the fact that they actually have practical applications instead of being just a decoration is great. The color palette is great, and it feels like Grookey and the other Gen 8 starters have way more personality to them than their predecessors. Grookey is probably the hardest Pokemon for me to rank because it's even more borderline S tier than Litten, and it would definitely be up there if it wasn't dethroned by one of the Gen 9 Pokemon, which I like even more. Grookey is definitely at the top of A tier. Sobble is a Pokemon I instantly fell in love with when the Gen 8 starters were revealed. He's a water chameleon that can turn invisible and has a bad case of anxiety. I love every part of his design, from his worried expression to his derpy little hands and his big head frill. His color palette is perfect. I have nothing bad to say about Sobble and want to protect it at all costs. I'm thankful this is a tier list of just the starter forms because his evolutions are horrific, although Inteleon grew on me a bit more once he got a gun. Sobble is a perfectly designed Pokemon and one of my favorites, right up there with Garchomp, Rookidee, and Gyarados. Sobble easily surfs to the top of S tier. Scorbunny is another awesome design. It seems like the starter Pokemon that knows how to have the most fun. I like its big colorful ears, its joyful expression, and how its feet light the ground on fire when it runs. That's a way cooler idea than if he was just a rabbit with a fire tail. My only complaint is that the yellow rectangles on his face and the bottom of its feet seem like they were added just because it looked a little bit too simple without them, and they didn't know how to finish the design. I think maybe they're supposed to be band-aids or tape to make it seem more athletic or something, but they look a little arbitrary to me. Scorbunny is still one of my favorites, almost tied with Litten as my favorite fire starter. Scorbunny goes in the middle of A tier. Finally, we've arrived at Generation 9, which was only recently announced. We don't know much about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet other than the region is based on Spain, the trainers have no swag, and the graphics have been turned up from GameCube graphics to PS2 graphics. The new starters were revealed and people have been pretty hyped about them the last few weeks. Sprigatito instantly became immortalized as Weedcat as soon as the reveal trailer dropped. I was on YouTube that morning and managed to catch it minutes after it first aired, and within the hour, Twitter was filled up with memes and furry art of everyone's favorite new Pokemon, including some by yours truly. The memes, that is. I love Sprigatito's design so much it instantly became my favorite starter Pokemon. Sorry, Sobble. I love the big expressive eyes, the cheek tufts, and the big weed collar. Sprigatito is in a league of its own and dethrones Sobble as the best starter Pokemon. I pray to Arceus that it doesn't get an anthropomorphic evolutionary form like Litten. Everyone is sick of that shit. Quaxly is a solid design. It looks a little bit like Donald Duck, but I like the simple, understated design. The hat is the most interesting part of him. It sort of looks like a beret or some other sort of military hat. My hope is that he evolves into a Catalonian revolutionary given the Spain theme, but Game Freak probably doesn't have the cojones for something that cool. I don't have that much to say about Quaxly. It looks perfectly average to me, and so it goes in low C tier, in between T-Pig and Charmander. Lastly, we have Fuecoco. Honestly, I think Fuecoco looks pretty strange. It's supposed to be a fire crocodile, which is a cool idea, but I think it would look better if it was on all fours like Sandile, or if it had a more clear design like Totodile. With its red color and that yellow thing on its head, I think it looks like an apple or tomato. It looks like the most edible Pokemon since Slowpoke Tail. The big white face kind of reminds me of a Shy Guy too. It's not my favorite design. I don't like the weird mouth with 3 teeth, the oversized feet, or the random yellow rectangle on its body. It's like Scorbunny's Band-Aid, but even more random. I get the feeling its final form will look pretty cool, but Fuecoco doesn't really do it for me. I'll put him in the middle of D tier. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and leave a comment about how you would rank the Pokemon and what sort of tier lists you would like to see in the future. Peace!